So sterile processing could not be more excited, but they know there's other stakeholders in it. So here's what the OR says. The OR says, oh, we love this thing. We've cut our turnover time by 6 minutes. Now, Justin, you and I both know every OR in the country is measuring their turnover time, and you cut 6 minutes off of it, you're going to get some hugs, right?
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you are tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
On this vendor spotlight, we are speaking with Mark Copeland, VP of Sales at 3T Medical Systems, Inc. I've known Mark for quite a while. You're going to hear that story today in this podcast. And then as well, we've talked a lot about IST OneTray and their total solution. That's OneTray, Easy Tracks, and OneCart. But today we're going to be talking about it from a different perspective, which is the rep's perspective. So Mark has been distributing this product for quite some time. As a matter of fact, since the first days when I met him and being involved in HSP and ISHM chapters. And so he's got some unique perspective. He's also been very active on LinkedIn lately, and he's got a lot to talk about, especially related to breaking down the silos in healthcare and working with value analysis. So all that and more in today's interview with Mark. Stay with us. We're going to be right back.
From 17 Studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
I am speaking now with Mark Copeland, VP of Sales at 3T Medical Systems, Inc. And Mark, I've seen you being active on LinkedIn, and this is your first appearance on the Beyond Clean podcast, but you and I have known each other for quite some time. As a matter of fact, since probably the first year that I had switched from a nursing career and gone into medical sales. You and I were both active in our local HSPA chapter, then ISHM. And now here we are. I got to apologize to you that it's taken us over 13 years to get you on the podcast, which has been in existence for half of my career since getting involved in sterile processing.
It's probably the right timeline, Justin, and it is good to see you. And it's always good to talk to you, buddy. And yeah, it was funny. That was when my business partner and I, Mark Randall, the other Mark, we started selling OneTray and started going to the local sterile processing meetings and quickly learning we knew nothing. So that's probably a good way to start.
Well, honestly, you and I were starting at the same time. I knew nothing as well, and definitely got incredibly involved in our local chapter, and certainly didn't lead it, but did a lot of the administrative work behind the scenes. We had some really great conferences. I remember having up to 250, 300 attendees there in central Pennsylvania. And I'm just kind of wondering, even as you were learning about sterile processing, what was it that you learned over the years about sterile processing and their needs?
So I had been a spine rep at that point for 9 or 10 years, right? And in a lot of those hospitals that we were at these meetings with. So I knew a lot of the folks. They had helped me many times. So I sort of knew how important what they did was. I had no idea how complicated it was or any of the why. I just knew what they did. I didn't know how or why they did it. That was the first sort of learning that I would say it was like cold splash of water in the face. Here's a vendor rep, been around sales forever, been around these sterile processing departments forever, knew everybody by name, and really even had an appreciation, really had no idea what everybody was doing.
Well, you got into the weeds too, didn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, especially when you're bringing a technology, and that's kind of your lead in, other than, hey, help me get my trays ready. Now, all of a sudden, you're immersing yourself into the daily operations of sterile processing, and you're bringing in an innovative technology. I'm sure you found yourself immersed a lot deeper than you ever expected.
Oh, totally. And, I don't want to say ignorant has a pejorative sense of it. But we really were. We thought with One Tray, we had something that we knew would solve problems that sort of every place faced. Because as I always joked, I was a spine rep. My stuff was what was causing all the problems, And so I'm coming into the hospital saying, hey, all those problems I caused, now I can think I can help. But we really didn't understand the complexities, the physics, the process. And there's one good way to learn. It's to go talk to a bunch of people and stand in their departments while you're waiting for something to sterilize. And these folks were so nice to sort of teach us this stuff. But it was learning by fire, but it was great. We
had a great region for leaders in sterile processing to take reps under their wing. I will say that there were so many that were willing and capable teachers and would give you the time. And I think ultimately it really helped their departments in the end increase that awareness. And here you were, somebody who had all of those contacts and knowledge in the operating room and those relationships. But I would say that in many cases, as you were learning that information with sterile processing, you were probably advocating and sharing that information with the operating room contacts and professionals that you'd been working with all along that may have also not had that level of understanding. Is that kind of true? Did you champion SPD as part of your learning?
Absolutely. But actually, before we even started this, I sort of was, because I was just sort of raised to realize, like, oh my gosh, these people bail me out in so many instances. The least I can do is try to return the favor and do things the way they're asking, 48 hours, whatever, whatever you could do. But I was standing in operating rooms explaining to operating room staff and surgeons, look, it's coming. It'll be up here this long. They can't turn something around in 12 minutes or 20 minutes. Here's why. And so you end up becoming an advocate. I can't tell you how many times in Pinnacle Harrisburg Hospital, I was telling the surgeon, look, there's a wet tray. It's probably my tray's fault, and it's going to be ready in 2.5 hours. So don't yell at them. It's most likely my fault. Because you can't, you got to stand up when it's your fault and take responsibility for it. So we were I would definitely say we were as much of an advocate as you could be without really understanding it. And then once we started to understand it, you become a bigger advocate. Mark and I will tell you, we were standing in operating rooms up and down the East Coast explaining operating room stuff to sterile processing people. But more than that, we were explaining sterile processing to operating room people, because it was so siloed, and still is. And it helped us present our product at that point, just One Tray, in a way that they could have reasonable expectations, because they'd hear 4 minutes. That doesn't mean you can have it in 4 minutes. No, that's not what it means. So we did a lot of that, because you just end up having to do it. So,
well, setting reasonable expectations is actually part of your job as a good sales representative. And part of setting those expectations are not setting expectations around what you can do in your silo. And I really like that you brought up the silos, because it's also something that I've noticed about the content that you're creating on LinkedIn is you're talking a lot about value analysis. And what is, I think, so unique and also such a strength of value analysis teams is that they do integrate different perspectives, and there's no other function other than maybe supply chain. And honestly, value analysis is the function of supply chain that accomplishes this. There's no other function in the healthcare system that really touches every single department and can help be an advocate or a vehicle for breaking down some of those silos. Why do you think value analysis is so important, even from a rep's perspective? Because I'm definitely going to ask you a lot more and really want you to share your experience as a rep and some of the challenges out there. But even before we do that, being a rep is one of the silos. Being in sterile processing is one of the silos. But you're trying to reach a lot of different audiences, and I think you're leveraging value analysis as a topic to be able to pull all those different audiences together that you can speak to.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's funny. That was not the intent when I started posting on LinkedIn, but it sort of became, I guess, sort of what I became known for. And I've been 18 years in spine. I've been 10 years calling on sterile processing. And I've spent 10 years trying to understand value analysis. And here's the funny thing is you talk about silos, reps, sterile processing, operating room staff, and surgeons have no understanding of value analysis. And I realized if I could get good at it, I could get the navigation system I'm trying to sell. I'm more likely to get it approved. I could help a place who needed one trays to do things. We could put it in a business platform that would make sense to value analysis if value analysis needed to get involved with it. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. We're trying to sort of kick some of the silo walls down, but there's a whole nother one. And I've talked to a bunch of value analysis people, and they will say to me, to a person, and they're very nice people. I really like them. You talk to a lot of them too. They'll say, oh no, yeah, our process is very clear to our clinicians. And I'm like, no, it's not. Because I've stood with your chair of neurosurgery. I've stood with the busiest orthopod in your hospital. And I say to them, how do you get things approved? And they say, I have no idea. So it's not clear. And so it's funny. There's a lot of people in that same boat who you would think somebody would know. And there certainly are some, right? So that's why I started posting about it, because I'm like, there's no way this, for instance, this product line, this total solution that IST has, like look, nothing's for everybody, right? But there's no way when you step back and look at something, just using that as an example, that it scratches the itch that everybody has. Surgeons, operating rooms, sterile processing, reps, finance, or value analysis. But nobody talks the same language. And we found ourselves sort of standing there being the Rosetta Stone to all of them. And, you know, I think there's value in that. So when I sell something like IST's products, the One Tray, Easy Tracks, One Cart, I'm not just selling it to directors of sterile processing. I'm not just selling it to directors of surgical services. I'm selling it to value analysis, because if you don't, you have no idea if any money's going to come your way. And I actually think value analysis, I've come to this conclusion that I think they're the true customer, ultimately. Everybody's stakeholders.
How else can you make the business case at a higher level that's going to align with a strategy, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing that you're talking about. When we sell into silos or siloed departments, the value prop is singular. But now, with the way that health systems are sort of targeting initiatives, you know, there are some small opportunities and everybody can chip away at that. But the state of healthcare right now is kind of demanding some transformational initiatives and even the bandwidth to make those types of changes. When you look, especially through a supply chain lens, the amount of back orders and back order management, it really has them inundated. So some of those smaller wins are just harder to focus on. And the chipping away is kind of going to the wayside, and they're looking for big swings of the bat. And you don't get that accomplished unless you are involving multiple departments. And I think, you know, a big part of that is also giving voice to SPD, because you can make a big transformational change, but maybe it doesn't fit into the policies, procedures, and operations of sterile processing, even if it meets the OR's needs. And you have to be thinking about that, because there's nothing worse than putting a ton of time into a big transformational initiative just to watch it fall through, because you don't have the engagement that you need from every one of the stakeholders in the organization. So I think you're wise to be talking, you know, about all of that. But I want to tie in the rep now. I want to kind of go back to the rep, and I want to walk back in time and just sort of tell me, because I feel like the partnerships that health systems are looking for, the added value that they're looking for from their supplier partners has really gone up a notch too, because to make transformational changes, you really need people that are credible, that are going to be involved in that process, that can consult with the healthcare system, maybe bring more to the table than simply a solution, right? And just selling the product in, but maybe they're becoming part of the implementation or the operational changes, or maybe they're a resource to the right kind of clinical data, and, you know, just so many aspects to that. But let's talk about the rep's involvement. Like, what, from an outside perspective, selling into healthcare at multiple different facilities, what are some of those common challenges that you faced as a rep and that you hear from other reps that it's like, man, we know healthcare systems, and every time it's like this and we feel like there's nothing we can do about it, but boy, would they run better if we could solve this challenge. What are some of those?
Let's go from the tippy top of Maine to the bottom of Florida and all the way up to the West Coast. Here's something that every single rep in the country, and nobody in sterile processing believes me when I say it, but they should. You think sterile processing hates loaners. Reps hate it more. They can't trust it. They can't count on it. They're trying to pull stuff off FedEx trucks. They're delivering stuff in pickup trucks, which, as we've seen on LinkedIn, is not really what people would like to see, but reps are being stretched thin with logistics. And as I've said to you before, nobody needs to pull out Kleenex and crying about their orthopedic and spine vendors, right? No, they're not starving, but here's the issue they're running into. They're being involved with logistics to a point, and it's all because of the market. I always joke, like, the answer to all of your questions is money. When implant prices so back up for a second. Procedures have doubled. Orthopedic procedures and spine have doubled in the last 12 years. And they're going to double again in the next 10 years because of baby boomers. So there's this massive growth of procedures. Should be awesome, except surgeons are now doing, if they did 200 total knees, they used to do it at, mass, whatever the hospital down the street is. Well, now they do 100 there. They do 50 at this ASC and they do 50 at that ASC. And now you're trying to get stuff everywhere, right? And you got to transport it. And at the meantime, implant prices were pushed down by our friends in Value Analysis. Like it or not, it went from a $9,500 total knee prosthesis to $3,500. Great, right? But what it made companies say is, Justin, you're an orthopedic surgeon. You're going to use our total knee 4 times a month. We give you a set of instruments to support it, right? Well, now what they say is, hey, Justin, no offense, we need you to use it twice a week. We need you to use it 8 times a month before you get another set of instruments, right? And so you now are not only have to do more cases.
They're rationing inventory because they know that trunk stock is technically a loss if it's not in use at the right volume levels.
Their profits went down. Yeah, their profits went down on it, so you can't support as easily. Plus, you're getting busier. Plus, you're doing robotics, navigation, like all that complexity. And now you're doing it in 3 places. So this is what makes these reps go crazy. And it's, again, there's no complaining, but I understand what they're dealing with because we're pulling stuff off FedEx trucks. We have hospitals that are like, hey, we want it in 2 days before. And you're like, listen, I want it in 3 days before, but you'll get it about an hour after I get it because I'm going to get it the day before. And like, I've talked to people at Big Ortho, at Big Spine, up and down the East Coast, all over. It's the same story everywhere, right? So you can call it rationing. You can call it lack of investment by Big Ortho, Big Spine. I have no idea what it is, but I do know what it's driven by. It's driven by money, and you have to use those sets more. And it's really difficult. COVID made it a little bit harder for manufacturers to even make more sets. So that's what these reps are up against. I feel bad for them. I had a rep tell me I do 5 total knees on a Friday at the ASC because my surgeon doesn't have to round on those patients. And then Monday, right down the street, he does 5 total knees at the hospital. And so I'm bringing instrument sets in Friday night that we used at the ASC or Saturday morning for Monday cases. And it's usually, and he's like, I can't make any more sets. And that's what these reps are dealing with. So like sterile processing should be frustrated. But if you talk to 100 sterile processing departments and say, how's that 48-hour thing work? And they're like, every one of them, it works about as well as every place. Poorly. They got to have it in place. But everybody's stretched. Everybody is dealing with this. And so I'm not giving excuses. I'm giving reasons why it's like it is. That's why you're seeing FedEx trucks. That's why you're seeing pickup trucks. I had somebody say that. So that's what you're dealing with. That's why I feel bad for a lot of these folks.
Well, it's strain on everybody who's involved in surgical services and really healthcare even more broadly. I mean, up until I think maybe 6 months ago, hospitals were still operating on negative margins. The finances of healthcare haven't recovered the same way as other industries post-pandemic. And a lot of that is just related to the way the payer contracts are with Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance. That didn't update. And yet, the the operational costs on the hospital are much higher. Costs have gone up, staffing, etc. Back orders have changed pricing. A lot of pricing has had to go up for a lot of different reasons. And so now we're kind of hitting this like straining point, and it's really impacting everybody. And you did a really good job of kind of talking about what the challenges are for the reps who are trying to collaborate and get these procedures done. Because at the end of the day, the biggest revenue generator, as you mentioned, is the operating room. So we work together to try to generate as not much revenue to navigate the challenges of today's healthcare environment. But with as much strain as on it, it's really difficult. So I think that's why kind of goes back to having something that's really transformational in changing the way that hospitals, deliver services. And obviously your niche, an area of expertise is surgical services. It's why, you're on the Beyond Clean podcast with me today. We've talked a lot about the total solution from a lot of different perspectives. But since I know that you've been, working with IST One Tray for many, many years, since I've known you anyway, maybe you could walk us through the total solution, but take us down this path from a different perspective, which is the perspective of the vendor rep who is also under this strain. Like, how does each of these, One Tray, Easy Tracks, and One Cart really help address some of those concerns that you just outlined for us? And maybe we start with One Tray.
Yeah. And what I'll do is I'll give you an example. The first place we did. So obviously One Tray lets you steam sterilize instruments in a fraction of the time and store them, right? It's been around a long time. People get a sense of what it does. The first time we integrated Easy Tracks into an account with One Tray, I'm going to use the example because I like talking about the stakeholders, and the stakeholders in it are the reps, the OR, sterile processing, finance. Oddly enough, the surgeon really wasn't involved in this first example, but it's still the single best example I can give to show how everybody at the end of it was happy. And One Cart didn't even exist yet. I wish it had, because they probably would have liked that too. But I'll give you a quick background. So there's a little hospital, now part of a larger system. The director of sterile processing loved this Easy Tracks concept. She wanted to be able to take vendor consignment trays that lived in the building and and migrate all the instruments to Easy Tracks. So here's the example they used. They had a surgeon who was a busy knee surgeon. He did 120 knees a year. He was using a big ortho company, and each time they used it, they used 7 of this big ortho company's trays, right? So they kept 3 consignment sets in the hospital. So they had 21 trays on their shelf to support those. So hopefully everybody's following this, right? We took 100% of the instruments and migrated them over to 9 Easy Tracks, 3 per case. So we went from 7 trays to 3 trays, 100% of the instruments. Now, and then we put them in One Trays. Now that may not sound transformative. I'm going to tell you it was. Now we focused. It is
when you start talking about the space limitations, and especially when you talk about cases moving towards the ASC, and like you want to talk about being starved for space. Boy, does it get tight in that setting.
So let's talk about this, because I'm gonna show how each stakeholder loved this thing, and I'm gonna put numbers and I'm gonna put dollars with it, because that's why we're really here, right? So sterile processing migrates up with the rep, with the OR. That was done very intelligently by this director of sterile processing. And it was so cool. I was sort of standing there helping, but who the hardest person to get involved was the rep, because the rep was really nervous. He was going to lose instruments. He was going to get instruments thrown at him because they weren't going to be in there, right? Because that's what happens to reps. So we migrate 21 sets of instruments down to 9 Easy Tracks so we could support 3 cases. So sterile processing loved it. And I want to pull up my notes, because I have them here because I got numbers, baby, and numbers are what makes people really excited. So sterile processing did this guy's 120 knees in 1 year. They used to do 840 trays to support his case, 7 times 120. Now they moved to 360 trays, right? Saved them $200 per procedure because of $50 a tray. This is all their numbers, by the way, not mine.
Yep. But you're talking about the cost of
turnover.
reprocessing, correct?
Right,
$50 a tray is
Yeah.
So that might even be a conservative number. That's still
and
significant.
we assumed it's the same whether you're blue wrapping something or putting it in one tray, because it probably is. But we just that was what they wanted to do. So let me pull my notes up. So then we shortened their decontam to delivery of sterile product, that total time, by 2.58 hours, right? So which was significant to them.
Now that's total?
And it was measured. Yeah. So it went from something like 6.5 to 7 hours to down to 4.5 to 5, right? So they couldn't have been happier. So they're sterilizing less trays, all the instruments, less trays. They loved the fact that they didn't get this bolus dose of instruments that hit, that big bolus of, as James Carlock calls it, of all these instruments hitting decontam and loading up at once. There's still instruments hitting it, but it was 60% less. Their mistakes, their errors went down 18% because less trays means less type 5s to forget, right? Like
more time to focus on inspection and accuracy. 100%.
Yeah, yes. And it's easier visually. So sterile processing could not be more excited, but they know there's other stakeholders in it. So here's what the OR says. The OR says, oh, we love this thing. We've cut our turnover time by 6 minutes. Now, Justin, you and I both know every OR in the country is measuring their turnover time, and you cut 6 minutes off of it, you're going to get some hugs.
Yeah,
right?
I've seen some pretty crazy numbers for the cost of an OR minute. So that does add up.
Yeah, $50 a minute is basically a conservative number to use.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've heard a lot of people go over $100 a minute. So again, another conservative estimate, but that adds up when you start looking at it in aggregate over the course of a year.
Yeah. Well, and sterile processing
and case delays, right? Like just think, from a customer service perspective, the length of the day, those things compound on each other. So once you have one delay, it extends to the next one. So yeah, to your point, being able to reduce the turnover time is significant in maintaining your schedule.
Yeah. The OR, you're going to love this, dude. Like the OR on time starts went up, documented, right? They were thrilled. They also said something we hadn't anticipated. Hey, we don't need another second back table. That was part of the reason why their turnover time and breakdown time got faster, because they didn't need all that other extra whole different table. So the OR says to us, because I remember saying to the OR techs, how are we feeling about this? Because you never know what you're going to hear. We love it, they said, right? We put it in front of value analysis and we showed this, and I'll rattle this off. We're going to save you $112,000. By the way, one surgeon, one procedure. This is not all their surgeons and not all their procedures, just one. We're going to save you $112,000 over 5 years in just tray prep costs. Nothing else. It's going to pay for itself in 3.6 months. You're going to get about a 10.7 cost benefit ratio on your investment. Now that's, like, I sound like I know what I'm talking about because I kind of do, but that's the language value analysis uses, right? And because I'm in sales. Perioperative services director looks at me and the director of sterile processing. We had put this together with her, and she was presenting, and she just had me there.
Collaboration is key.
That would come up.
Yep.
The perioperative services director turns to us and goes, please tell me we're doing this, right? And I'm like, I think we're going to get the investment that these guys need. And so they integrate one tray. They integrate Easy Tracks. Remember the rep? I talked to the rep and I'm like, all right, are you happy? He's like, we haven't lost an instrument. He said, I need 20. They tracked this. 24% less loaners, right? Like, wow, nobody likes loaners. There's a number on that, right? So I'm sitting there and he's like, I love this thing. It's so much easier for me. Oh, by the way, I forgot the OR said, oh yeah, because of Easy Tracks and one tray, we open them up. Circulator opens it. Hey, everything's here. Type 5s are on it. Cool. I'm going to go get the patient. That's why they were able to do their on time and stay on schedule sooner, because they could go get them while they're not waiting and holding up blue wrap. So if you think about it, vendors won, which is great. Sterile processing won, which is tremendous, matters mostly to your audience. The operating room could not have been happier. And value analysis, the so-called bean counters, couldn't have been happier with the amount of beans we were delivering for them to count, right? And that was one surgeon, one procedure. They then rolled it out into all of their other orthopedic surgeons and their procedures. It took time. We didn't have one cart at that time, but it's funny. They got 15 feet of shelf space in sterile processing to store it now because they went to Easy Tracks and One Tray because they were storing stuff in case carts, sterile product in case carts, because they didn't have any space left. Right. So I don't know that one cart would have necessarily helped that, but I can tell you it's like 40% less the footprint. So whatever it is.
Well, in the ASC, this really matters. Again, talking about space and watching these procedures move into that outpatient, the procedure is acute, right? But that non-acute setting for a lot of these orthopedic procedures, saving 40% on that footprint is huge, especially when you think about how much gets stacked out in the halls. That's a real issue in a much more congested environment too. And
you'll like this joke, Justin. So the rep said to me, he's like, we had to come up with a saint. So we said Saint Hank Balch. We said Balch at that point because he was so noisy on Beyond Clean, right? Like, you don't have to pray to Saint Balch, the patron saint of no tears, no wet packs, type 5 integrators, category 5 integrators, remember, cause that's what reps do. They go to bed at night going, I don't have any redundant instruments. If there's a hole in this, I'm either getting delayed or God forbid that surgeon's going to use my competitor who is sterile. His stuff's sterile down the hall. So you go to bed at night going, oh, please, don't be a wet pack. And spine guys go, oh God, and please, if there is, don't be my implants, right? We're nerds. That's who we pray to at night. At least some of us do. And that's he didn't have that. I don't know how you put a number on that, but he couldn't have been happier.
Well,
and the OR was so much more predictable, it was so much more on time, all because they started to put things in a personal bias, the best rigid container on the market, in a modular system that let everybody have all their instruments. They didn't have to cut anything out. They didn't have to streamline with Easy Tracks. And that's what's the dream. That's where they talk about a total solution, but it's like a big pain reliever, and it doesn't solve the world's problems, but boy, it keeps your OR on time, and that matters to surgeon satisfaction. Thank you, value analysis. I know it's important. Patient equity, because everybody gets the sort of same treatment throughout the day. There's another value analysis thing. These things all tie together. But if you only sell or talk about your department and you don't kick the silos down, your batting average is going to be way lower. And that's why, so when we put these things together, we're everybody that needs to see, they're going to see it. And we put the business analysis together so that sterile processing, value analysis, the OR, loved it.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I really like the story of collaboration here. And amazingly, this went very, very quickly. And I just want to kind of let everybody know that you're more than happy to be a resource. They can definitely connect with you and follow you on LinkedIn. A lot of what you're talking about, it's not product specific. This is the lives that we're all living these days. You're speaking on a lot of different topics from a lot of different perspectives. But I like this story about collaboration, and especially as it relates to the total solution. I'm wondering if there's some people out there that might want to get in touch with you, especially to just pick your brain more about how do we engage the vendors in an initiative like this? How do we speak to the operating room? Maybe there's vendors out there that are like, hey, tell me how you did it, because I can see that this could really help me as well. How can they reach out to you? How can they contact you, Mark?
They can always follow me on LinkedIn at Mark Copeland, or email me at mcopeland@3T Medical. I'm findable. I'm big and noisy and findable. Or they can reach out to IST at Innovative Sterilization Technologies or One Tray. But we have great people everywhere. They can find me, and they can find, me through you guys, and I'll help anybody I can. It's not, I understand this is a problem. I am sensitive to the sterile processing folks who have to deal with this every single day. But at heart, I'm a rep. So I also, I'm going to sound like you're going to laugh. I feel your pain, right? But I do. And so if these groups can just get their heads together and fix a couple of things like this, it makes everybody's lives better. And ultimately, it improves patient care. There's no doubt about it. And that's really the whole goal to this thing. So, and I love this stuff. I find it fascinating.
Oh, we had so many great conversations. at the conferences and the chapter meetings. And, even if you mentioned reaching out, for more information directly to IST One Tray as well, we're going to have some links associated with this. Not only the link to the total solution page on IST's website, but also the links to the surgeon efficiency study. So there's some resources there that we'll be making available to go along with this podcast. And honestly, Mark, I love what you're putting out there on LinkedIn. You definitely don't split any hairs. You go right after it. You're definitely your authentic self there on LinkedIn. And I think that's why you're having some great success. I know you've only been doing this for 6 or 7 months, but you seem like a natural, and you're natural at a podcast as well. Not a surprise to me. I've known you for a long time, but congratulations on your first appearance on the Beyond Clean podcast. And I wanted to thank you for coming on today.
Thanks. I'm going to need somebody to deflate all the air in my head now, because they're going to think I'm going to get a big head from all these compliments. Thanks, buddy. I like what you guys do. I really like these products, and I really do care about what sterile processing people have to deal with every day, because they are so integral to what happens in the OR. And the sooner they realize it, the better off we all are. And so I'm going to keep doing it, So thanks, buddy. I really appreciate it.
That was Mark Copeland, VP of Sales at 3T Medical Systems, Inc. And I just love today's conversation, not only to pull the curtain back a little bit on what it's like to be a vendor rep and some of the creative ways that they can be partners in improving efficiencies through surgical services, not only working with value analysis, but all the departments, SPD, operating room, supply chain, and really pulling together, a bigger picture for transforming how we deliver care to our patients and find operational efficiencies under the pressure that we're in. But I really liked his collaboration conversation at the very end and encouraging other reps to collaborate more closely with sterile processing leaders out there. He's been doing it for a long time. I've watched him do it. And today's conversation, not a surprise to me. It was great having Mark on his very first episode of Beyond Clean. Looking forward to having him back. And thank you all for listening to this Vendor Spotlight on Beyond Clean.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app, or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.